Welcome to this series of alumni career conversations, where over the coming 3 months, we're talking with PhD alumni about their careers in industry and academia. I'm Lee Sublet, and I'm the Manager of Alumni Affairs, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here today for the conversation, which is taking place right before KAUST's first ever virtual career expo for our students and broader alumni community. So we wish all of our participants in the Career Expo all the very best with their conversations and networking. Today, I am pleased to introduce 3 extraordinary alumni who graduated 5 years ago with PhDs from KAUST. And over the next 40 or so minutes, we're going to talk to each of them about their careers in industry and academia. And this is the first in a series of conversations that we're going to be having about industry, academia, one or both, or the one or the other, for our PhD students and graduates, because we often get asked, as a student, can you please connect us with a graduate who has completed a PhD, because I can't decide if I want to go into industry or academia. So hopefully this series of conversations helps to at least take a look at that topic. So it's my pleasure to introduce our 3 speakers today. Dr. Ahmed Shibl, who is a research associate at NYU Abu Dhabi, Dr. Alaa Ezzedine, who is a strategy manager for KPMG in Hobart in Saudi Arabia, and Dr. Johannes Fischer, who is a biochemist, trained medical doctor, entrepreneur and consultant. And all 3 of our fabulous speakers graduated in 2015. I'm going to hand over first to you, Ahmed, to introduce yourself, and so if you could each do that for a couple of minutes, that would be great.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Leah, for having us and bringing us together. This brings back so many memories. My name's Ahmed Shib, as Leah introduced me, and I graduated with a PhD from marine science in 2015. So basically, my PhD or my studies during that time revolved around microbial communities in the Red Sea. So we had the opportunity to go out using research vessels, gather some samples, bring it back to the lab, and work on that for my PhD and for the other lab members. From that, I went on to do a very short postdoctoral fellowship with Professor Cello Moran, and I co-mentored his PhD student at the time to work with, or to continue working with the strains that we have grew from the Red Sea. From that, I did another postdoc in the UK, and now I'm in Abu Dhabi at New York University, Abu Dhabi, doing as a research associate in the microbial ecology lab. And this is what I'm doing at the moment.
Fantastic, Ahmed. Alaa, could you introduce yourself?
Hello, thank you again, Lee, for having me. And this is really nice to see some common faces. So Ahmed and Johannes, very, very common faces. So good to be on this discussion. So as you rightly mentioned, my name, Alaa Azzadin. I came to KAUST in 2012 and I graduated in 2015. A PhD in chemical sciences. I joined Naveen Khashab's lab, one of the amazing experience indeed. And after my graduation, I stayed in Saudi. I did 2 years of work with a company called Frost & Sullivan for market research within the chemical industry. And then I moved to KPMG, a consulting company where I joined their strategy department. So currently I reside in Khobar with my wife, and I work for KPMG in the Khobar office.
Thanks, Alaa. Johannes, last but not least, could you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to meet you, Leah. And like I said earlier, I think it's quite nice to see Alaa and Ahmed again. So my name is Johannes. I, like Alaa, joined KAUST in 2012. That sounds like a really long time ago. Spent, I would say, wonderful 3 years, in part in Saudi Arabia. So I was one of the few students that did a joint PhD with another university at the time. So I wasn't in KAUST as frequent as Alaa or Ahmed, I suppose. But nevertheless, I enjoyed my time there actually quite a lot. I was working for a professor called Jörg Eppinger, and focused a lot on proteins, X-ray crystallography, and in the end, what we called artificial metalloenzymes. So sort of a convergence between protein biology and inorganic chemistry. Yeah, after KAUST, where I graduated in 2015, is that correct?
Yeah.
Also sounds very, very long ago. I joined a consulting firm called LEK that specializes on the life sciences in part, and there worked a lot on commercialization and go-to-market strategies for pharmas and medtechs all around the world. So I did a number of projects in the European spaces, in the US, in China, in Australia, in South Africa. And then beginning of this year, joined a venture capital firm. So I think in this group here, I'm sort of in between the sciences and the business side of things. So I'm very much looking forward to the discussion.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all. I want to get straight into the question that we had some students during Orientation 2020 ask during our alumni panel. And that is, what motivated each of you to complete a PhD? And Alaa, I want to start with you. What motivated you to do a PhD?
So definitely the motivation was much earlier than it's the first day I started my journey in my undergrad school. So it came from the idea of a family business we have, where my dad has a paint company. And I wanted to be a chemist. I wanted to support the family business. I wanted to do the research required to enhance the products. And this is where all started. And I believe that having the PhD will definitely impact the family business. Now, definitely through the process, my mindset has changed, and I'm not currently working for the family business, but this was initially the motive, to do research, to understand the chemistry behind paints. And that's why part of my master's and PhD were mostly into organic chemistry, polymer chemistry. So the motive was personal in my case. It's just to support family business.
Great. Johannes, what about you?
I think for me, the motive was also quite personal. In my master, or during my master's, I had a professor whom I enjoyed working with very much, and he always confronted me with that one challenge in life where you excel one certain field to the point where you become the expert. And that discussion, or these discussions that I had with that particular professor, always put me on the spot where I was in a position of not having excelled, one specific thing, one specific question as part of my research, as part of my life. And then actually that made me think, why not doing a PhD at some point and really trying to become the expert in that one niche that you just have to identify for yourself. And I think that was the primary reason for me to commence with a PhD at some point, really to excel that one very niche thing that you really then understand better than anybody else.
Great. Thank you for that. Ahmed, what about you?
So I guess just like Alaa and Johannes, the motivation to start my PhD was long before I actually started. And part of the influence was my father is also a professor in microbiology, and so I just wanted to follow the footsteps of that. But once I started my PhD, to be honest, when you're at KAUST, you're among the brightest, most motivated people. And so it's very stimulating in terms of the intellectual atmosphere to keep going with your PhD. You're part of a global network once you start the PhD, and that also kind of motivated me to keep going in that direction. Another very important motivation, at least for me, was the discovering the answers to the questions that I had when I first started. And so it was kind of, okay, I need to figure this out by the end of my PhD. And so it kind of kept me going the entire time. So a mix of things, I have to say. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Ahmed. And, you know, thinking about the global network that you referred to that KAUST enables, our current student body, that very much continues once you become an alumnus as well, because we talk about our global alumni community, and just thinking about where you all are today. Ahmed, you're in Abu Dhabi, and Alaa's here in Saudi Arabia. And of course, Johannes, you're in Germany, but just your introduction, all of the different countries that you've had the opportunity of working in, I think that, you know, your generation is indeed very much the global generation. So I'm glad that we're talking in all different parts of the world today. Coming to you in Germany, Johannes, to continue on with this line of questioning, you know, I read about you. We have a story of you right now on our brand new fabulous alumni website, and I've had to read your story a couple of times because I think, how can you have achieved so much in such a relatively short period of time? So you left KAUST with a PhD, and then you went on to study medicine, or perhaps you were doing medicine while you were doing your PhD, but you can come back to that. You're an entrepreneur, and many folk around KAUST might know your face because you started Antinio, which has become Hungry Campus, and I think was most of our lifeline to the real world, and some much needed junk food, or not necessarily all junk food, but some delicious food during our lockdown. Now you're working in venture capital. You know, I suppose my question is, what was your rationale for completing a PhD if medicine or becoming an entrepreneur was actually your dream?
Oh, that's a difficult question. So how should I answer this? I think it was actually, so when I talked to Catherine a couple of months ago about my time at KAUST and then what happened thereafter, I realized I had done probably too much and too many things in parallel at some point. And saying this also reminds me of a couple of discussions with Alaa, who used to be my neighbor in KAUST, that I was either working too much, traveling too much, or not focusing on the one thing that I just now said I would want to do during my PhD. I think in the end of the day, I'm quite an interested person, so I like to follow things, and as long as I have a feeling that I can sort of satisfy the needs of anything that I work on, I'm good with that. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think this is a really tough question. The PhD was definitely something I wanted to do. During my PhD studies, I realized that it's more the application of science that I'm really interested in. And that just made me finish up that medical degree that I had started in parallel. And I remember lengthy discussions with Alaa on this particular topic, where he...
Maybe I can add something here. And knowing Hannes, it's the ambition as well, indeed. So part of the thing that keeps you going, whatever you're doing, whether it's a PhD or a job, it's the ambition. So Hannes had the ambition of knowing too many things about too many things. So like any PhD, you want to know too many things about too little. which is technically your thesis or your research. Hannes had this different mindset. So I learned from him in that sense, and he was definitely motivational, where he used to do these entrepreneurial activities, the readings, the books. I can see him reading on the weekend on the beach. I used to grab my book as well and go. So it's all part of the, personal evolution, right? So you build your own character, and this is, I think, Hannes' character by itself, just the way his mind functions. So yeah, it's very competitive when it comes to him.
But what about sleep? I mean, have you slept beyond 7 hours in the last 5 years?
I think I agree with Alaa. I have loads of ambitions, and I try to live up to them as much as I can. I think I have become more considerate. So take the example of Hungry Campus. Now there we have a team that actually takes care of the CAUS community, and I'm just involved in, more important decisions. So I tend to delegate more now, and I think that was part of the struggle that I had during my PhD and also with the medical degree. You can't delegate that; you have to do it yourself. But then you have these other things that you want to do as well. So I'm still very happy for all the decisions that I've made. I think looking back, some of them definitely made me stronger, and some of them were definitely a challenge. But that's life for me, and I think that's life in general. So I'm fairly happy, I would say.
Right. Well, academically, is there anything missing? I don't see an MBA among your list of qualifications. Is there anything that's coming up next, or it's time just to focus on the work side of things?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. I've been actually asked a lot if at some point I would do what is quite common in Germany, to do a sort of a small PhD for the medical degree. But I think academically, I'm on hold for the moment. So I do enjoy my new job very much. I like the firm that I'm working for. I like the project. So I think for once, it's time to focus on almost one thing.
All right. Well, good to hear. Thank you for those answers, Johannes. That's great. Time for me to turn my attention to you, Ahmed. You've been within an academic environment in the UK, and now you're back in the region. I'm really interested in exploring, will it be academia that you continue to pursue in your career? Will it be industry? Do you need to make a decision, or can it even be both? I mean, what do you think?
So picking up from the last thing you said about it being both, at the moment with the fast-paced world that we live in, it could be both. There's a lot of companies in industry that provide postdoc positions or research positions to develop the research in their area, and so it is possible to combine both. Up until very recently, I was very focused on academia, but eventually I personally opened up to whatever environment that would allow me to pursue the questions that I have related to the environment. And so ever since I started my PhD and finished it in marine science, I became very interested in saving or conservation, the oceans, the environment, basically any ecosystem that we have, especially with all the human interference going on in the past years. And so, like I said, personally, I'm open to both academia and industry at the moment. And in any case, the industry would not be able to move forward without the fundamental or the basic research done in academia. So they complement each other. At some point, you would have to focus. But to answer your question very directly, I am open to both at the moment, and I think this is the advice that I would give to anyone down the line, is to stay open for those opportunities. For sure.
Fantastic, Ahmed. That was a great answer, and you know, I'm not a scientist. I have the joy of working with scientists and engineers and incredibly smart alumni like yourselves. And as somebody within a global community, I often think that there's not enough attention given to how critical those with a PhD who pursue careers in science and academia are to sustaining so many different ecosystems, whether it's environment, whether it's government policy, or whether it's the two of those coming together. So it is almost as though each of you who has a PhD and the two of you working in industry right now, you know, the PhD is almost the piece that makes you a little bit more convincing, if you will, to those who you are talking to, whether or not they're your clients or others. Alaa, that's probably a good segue into me coming to you, because you're working for KPMG, and I'm very interested in hearing about how your PhD supports you in your role as a consultant.
Yes, thank you, Lee. You said it right. And Ahmed also said it right about openness. So, you know, if you think about PhD is indeed a path, but it is not the final destination. It's not a destination. So after you finalize your PhD, you are on the path for many successful, you know, end destinations. And us on this call is a proof that all of us were on this path of having a PhD, but none of us ended up in the same destination, or, you know, the final destination of a career or a job. You know, ultimately, the person picks, after finishing his PhD, picks the most convenient, you know, job destination for him. Now, in relationship to your question, the right question can be, what is the business consulting and how does it relate to the PhD? So basically, us as business consultants, we provide solutions to business problems. Now, to do so, we interact with stakeholders, we gather data, we gather information, and then we analyze this information, okay? And this is exactly what we do in the PhD. So we gather the data, we analyze it, and then we produce a paper. So the problem is different in research. So when I do a business research, the problem is different than academic research, but the methodology is almost the same. Even the tools, if I talk about basic tools such as Excel, Microsoft, maybe we have a little bit more advanced tools to visualize the data, or you know, to analyze the data. But even with the basic tools, I use Excel and PowerPoint on daily basis. This is my bread and butter. So in that sense, the PhD is very helpful. Yes, I might not be using the chemical knowledge. I'm not doing reactions in a lab, but I'm using all the skills that I learned through my PhD. And this is very key. People sometimes underestimate you know, these skills of presenting, communicating, convincing someone with your work, designing a good slide, interacting with audience. But these are essential skills and very required in any job, and not necessarily in a PhD that ends up that in a PhD, you know, a career path where you end up as a professor. Not at all. You have to manage people, audience in any job you work with, even within research. When you work in a lab, you have to present to a group, you have to publish to a committee, and so on. So these are really important skills that I learned through my PhD, and they helped me a lot. I tell you, I'm a people person. And the guys who know me at KAUST, they know that every weekend I used to run gatherings, and on the weekends, and whenever there is a boat, I used to join a boat trip. Whenever there's a trip to Jeddah, I instantly run into the bus to join. So in that sense, this is a skill: talking, communicating, convincing, discussing. These are things you learn through your PhD. Presenting, because you see it. Some people, in a way, are shy to present, but through your PhD, you get to have these weekly presentations to your group, weekly discussions with your colleagues, and this helps you a lot in your job. Now, the missing part of the PhD that I did not learn that complement the business that I'm doing now, or the work that I'm doing now, is the business knowledge. And this is something we will discuss through this you know, conversation on how can a person accumulate this knowledge through his PhD.
Yeah. Well, just as an aside, in response to what you were talking about, Alaa, the communication, the opportunity to influence your audience, if you will, during those presentations that you make as a PhD student. Well, from my observation, and perhaps I'm wrong, those skills are often referred to as soft skills. And so soft skills to me always seem, warm and fuzzy, but in actual fact, if you, irrespective of PhD, masters, or simply a bachelor's degree, if you cannot communicate effectively, if you cannot get your point across, you really can't function professionally. So for me, everything that you've just been saying demonstrated that actually communicating, influencing is a hard skill. It is not a soft skill. Okay. But yeah, the business piece is something you've learned on the job.
So the business piece, it's a bit of both. So through my journey at KAUST, where I started in the mindset that I want to work in R&D, and I want to actually become a research scientist doing research for the big oil companies or petrochemical companies in the region. But as I moved forward in the PhD, I started to accumulate some business knowledge throughout the workshops and throughout the programs that were offered by KAUST, mainly the web and all these trainings of entrepreneurial trainings, business management trainings, project management trainings. And then I started to understand that there is a missing part that a missing knowledge that I did not acquire yet. And here I started to do some readings, and I had some couple of really nice books. One of them is called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and another one is called, actually let's focus on this one. So, and then I realized that there's a lot that I can do outside my PhD and outside my science knowledge. And this is where I start to do some online reading, simple book reading, online reading. And then when I wanted to join the consulting, I went through a series of proper preparation in terms of targeting books such as Case in Point and other books where I get ready to any job in the consulting industry. And this was really in later stages of my PhD where I felt very confident of my next step.
Great. Thanks, Alaa. I mean, speaking of business, Johannes, what does a day in the life of somebody who works in venture capital look like? I mean, it sounds so New York City, Wall Street, but it is, I mean, you're in Munich, right? So tell us about a day in the life of Johannes.
It's certainly not New York lifestyle, I would say. What do I do? I think, to be honest, let me start with another thing. So I wanted to pick up something that Alaa mentioned. I think sure. The progression from doing a PhD to going into consulting and then into venture capital for me was to be able to put a balance to the arguments that I'm collecting. So in my PhD, it was a lot around, endurance and applying the soft skills that we mentioned to come out at very good arguments to make a point. I think in consulting, I learned that there are arguments that are more important than others, and you need to be able to balance those arguments. And I think in venture capital, and I'm transitioning to what I'm doing, I'm actually more on the scientific side of things. So here I'm collecting a lot of arguments, scientific arguments, business arguments, and then I'm applying what I learned in consulting. I need to put a balance there, which means there are some arguments that are vastly more important, but to reach a certain stage, for example, you need good science. Hence, what I'm doing on a daily basis, I'm reading papers, I'm talking to many people around their science. I'm trying to question research. I have to get my head around what have people done, what are the missing data points to really prove a point, so we can then think about the business behind that. So I have my calendar open here, sort of on the other screen, and when I look at my days, my days usually start at 9, and then I have like 6-7 calls, each lasting half an hour to 45 minutes, an hour sometimes. just with companies, startups, around their data and around their business models. And once we have clarity on that, we then move forward and, question check IP, regulatory, and then get into negotiations around business terms and, and investment terms. And so my career has actually transitioned quite a bit from, like I said, having to make the overall argument, having to identify very balanced arguments for a certain question, now transitioning more into a more complex world where I really need to balance the learnings from my initial two career steps.
Look, I'm really interested in talking about your families, as in certainly, Ahmed, you've mentioned your father as a professor and somewhat of an inspiration. Alaa, you talked about your family's company and that being somewhat of a motivation early on for you to do a PhD. And Johannes, I know that in the piece that my dear colleague Catherine wrote about you, it refers to your mother, and perhaps like all parents, they want the best for their children, and many aspire for their kids to become doctors. Well, Johannes, in your case, you're doctor, so your family must be doubly proud. But I want to talk for a minute about, maybe I'll start with you, Johannes. Was your mother disappointed that you didn't pursue a medical path? Does she understand what you're actually doing in the world of venture capital?
I think she doesn't, to be quite frank. I think my parents don't, and I think most people don't understand what I'm doing. And that's partly driven because the industry is kind of lacking transparency a bit, I would say. So it's quite hard to understand what venture capital actually means. I didn't know before I was joining this firm what the exact role would look like. But to come back to your question, I think I actually had a quite funny interaction with her a week or two ago, where she confronted me with a newspaper article about a German biotech called CureVac and BioNTech. That's actually two that are working on this corona vaccine. And that article was all around, German biotech industry and how successful it has been in the recent years, and how the future might look like. And then she was looking at me and said, like, you should be part of this. And then I told her, Mom, I am part of this. So I think I'm fine where I am right now, and I think she begins to understand that I might have not pursued the career that she had envisioned, when I told her I'm finishing up the medical degree, but it's still fine. It's interesting. It's appealing to be in the place that I am, and therefore I think everybody around me is just happy for me.
That's fantastic. And when the media can mainstream something, that's helpful in not only your family understanding what it is that you do, but in others understanding as well. Thanks for that, Johannes. Ahmed, what about you? Is your family still hoping that you pursue a career in a professorial role, or are they happy to support you in whatever professional endeavor that you choose?
Yes, I have to say, short answer is yes, absolutely. I get a lot of support from them, of course, and they want to see me do more, and this is even more motivation for me to keep going and pursue more and more questions to answer about the environment and whatnot. But my dad is more on the medical side of microbiology, so he deals with infectious diseases and stuff, and so it is a really nice there is a really nice overlap between environmental microbiology or marine microbiology and medical microbiology, because a lot of the drug discoveries or a lot of the new antibiotics that we find come from the ocean. And so I engage with discussions about this a lot with him, and I learn a lot every time I speak to him about it. And so they definitely see that this is good for me, and they're happy. So yeah.
Fantastic. And Alaa, what about you? You didn't go into the family business. Did that cause a rift, or
No,
everything's good?
So I think when I finished my undergrad, my dad was very excited and he wanted me to join the company. But then I was furious because I thought it's not enough and I barely did any research in my undergrad. But after the master's degree, my ambition grows bigger for the PhD, and family started to realize that this ambition to pursue a PhD cannot be stopped. So they supported me fully, supported me in my journey, and even my dad financially. I remember throughout my master's, although I was working, but still I needed some money here and there, you know. So the support was unlimited in any aspect, in all aspects, emotional, financial, everything. And now, right now, where I am, my family is very happy because it was pretty obvious the success, right? So after 5 years at work, you can start feeling the success. So for example, you buy an apartment, a brand new car, you get married, you build a life. So the success story is there. And this is where the family begins to feel the happiness, right? So they can see the success you're actually doing and achieving. And I still give back to the family and support them. So in that sense, I try my best to have weekly conversations with my brothers, with my dad in terms of business aspect, how to run the business, how can I, you know, give them advice in terms of business consulting. Whatever I do at work, I try my best to reflect with my family, so I can at least give some guidance, some advice, not necessarily physically being on ground with them, but again, speaking about it and talking, this helps a lot, really. It builds up a good bond, a great bond between me and the family, and it helps a lot. It's good. It feels good.
Fantastic. Well, thank you each for those responses. I've had a question that's come in, and so I have Ahmed in my mind to respond to this question, but it might be something that you've each got a thought about. What was your mindset when you commenced your PhD? Ahmed, you might want to start with that, and then we can hear from Johannes and Alaa. Your mindset when you commenced your PhD, if indeed you remember.
Yes, of course. So when I started my PhD, I was actually coming from just finishing up my master's degree, and during my master's degree, I was under the KAUST fellowship, and so I was already familiar with KAUST, the work that they're doing, and all of that. I even had the opportunity to go out to the Red Sea in 2008. Even before the entire campus was up and running, and KAUST was already doing big things actually with its collaborators. And so when I commenced my PhD, it was more of the continuation of answering the questions that I already had. So during my master's, working with things similar to what is happening in KAUST, I had already built up a set of questions that I want to answer, a certain research direction. And honestly, coming to KAUST, it gives you this this vibe that the sky's the limit. And so in terms of resources, in terms of the people that you can engage with, the global network that you're going to eventually become part of. So my mentality was I was very focused in the beginning of my PhD. Well, you need to be focused throughout, but you tend to lose focus during the journey sometimes. But I had my eyes on the prize, like they say. And KAUST was definitely supportive of that in so many ways.
Thanks, Ahmed. Johannes, do you want to jump in and respond to that question that we've had from a student who's just commenced their PhD and is clearly interested in knowing what your mindset was when you embarked on your PhD a number of years ago?
fair question. So I think looking at the end, I was relieved, I would say. So, you know, I remember that evening when Alaa and I met in that big room to put on the rope, and we hugged each other because we hadn't seen each other for quite some time. And I was relieved because it was hard work. I mean, in particular, the last months of the PhD, I was not sleeping well, putting a lot of pressure on myself. So coming out at the end, I was proud of myself. I thought I'd made it, which I think was a fair judgment at the time. And so I think, you know, it was a very rewarding experience from the beginning to the end. And in the end of the day, when you go up to the stage and you're being congratulated and you receive your head, that was a superb feeling. And that will stay with me for forever, I suppose. And when I look back, I think this is exactly what I remember. I don't remember the long nights in the lab or before the lab. You know, we had these benches just in front of the lab where we were used to sit and write all these documents and do all these analyses. I don't look back to that, but I look back to the feeling I had whenever I had good results or whenever people congratulated me for the work that I had done.
Right, that sense of accomplishment. Mm-hmm. Alaa, when you began your PhD, do you remember how you were feeling? Did you think, oh, finally, I get to do all of that research I've been wanting to do all these years?
Yes.
You did?
Indeed, I remember that. I remember the day I went to KAUST. It was August 13, 2012. So it was a great day, I say. And so with respect to the question, it's a tricky question because if I want to think about the mindset I had when I joined the PhD, so I look at it from a different angle. What Hannes mentioned is amazing. And I have a joke I will say after this call about that moment when he hugged me. So with respect to the mindset, it's definitely not the same mindset when I finished my PhD. So I joined with a mindset that I want to be a scientist. I want to excel at doing research. I want to have as much publications and patent as possible. And I did achieve that. But when I left the PhD, I left with a different mindset. I left with a mindset that a PhD is a drop in an ocean. It's just the beginning of the journey. And I was amazed. So I thought when I finished the PhD, I will be like a king, you know, I will get the job I want and everything will be easy. And, you know, I will brag about it and post pictures and all. And I did do some of these, but believe me, the last 6 months in my PhD, I had 2 full-time jobs. One of them was writing my thesis, and the second one was looking for a job. The amount of rejections you get is enormous, but that should not put you down, not by any chance. Take pride in your research, know exactly your skills, and apply for the right jobs, and you will get it. It's a matter of the right time to apply to a job, to the right opening. So this is a different conversation for sure, but in brief, the mindset will all the time change and it will exponentially grow. As you move forward in your life, you will see it. You don't enter a PhD and leave it in the same mindset. Otherwise, you did not grow. And this is my takeaway. Now, with respect to the moment he hugged me, Hannes' brother was next to us, and he was holding the PhD, the actual degree, you know. And he was opening it, and it has really good vibes. When you see it, it's big, it's goldish, it's nice, and he was fascinated. And then I told him one sentence, and I told him, "This is the closest you can ever get to a PhD." And it's just holding the degree, and that's it. It's a very difficult journey, but it's highly rewarding. It's highly rewarding. This is what I say.
Fantastic, inspirational words. And our time discussing your own journeys as PhD alumni has almost ended, but I'd like to give each of you the opportunity to say a couple of closing words to our students who are listening today, and perhaps we've got other alumni who will be also joining in the conversation. So Alaa, your final words of wisdom or thoughts or advice to the audience today.
Yes. So I say flexibility. Flexibility is a key. Do your job well at KAUST. So in terms of academic, work-related jobs. So do your research, participate in scientific internships, conferences, workshops, but do not limit yourself to that. Be flexible, be open-minded. There are so many other events happening on campus. Do not underestimate these all year long events that happens on campus, the web programs, the selective, project management workshop where you have to apply and do an effort to write a letter or show credentials in terms of motivation. Participate on all of these, because this will give you a different picture on how can your career look like in the next 5, 10, or 15 years.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alaa.
Thank
Ahmed, what about you?
So first I want to say good luck to the students who are just starting in KAUST, and I think they are a very unique batch of students this year, given the circumstances. And so I do believe they're going to be a lot more resilient than many of us. Like Alaa said, they're going to be very flexible, which is key to doing their PhD and for post PhD. Also to the new students, I would say definitely pick up new skills. Don't get too comfortable with whatever skills you already have or whatever skills that come to you naturally. Try to focus on your weaknesses more and strengthen those. Again, just to emphasize, take part in as many events as possible. Take part in conferences. Do not shy away from asking people from different departments for help, for collaborations. From my experience, you will definitely find the support you need from KAUST and the people within. So don't be afraid and just jump into it with a full heart, and you'll get to the end. For the people graduating, I guess they need to be open to all the opportunities that they can get. We are going through difficult times, as they know, and so don't let rejections, don't let that get you down. Just like Alaa said, and keep going, keep applying, keep strengthening the skills that you need, and eventually it will all fall into place.
Great, thanks, Ahmed. Johannes.
I'm going to pick up the two themes that we just heard. So I think the resilience aspect that Ahmed mentioned, super high on my list. I absolutely agree with that. The openness that Alaa mentioned, absolutely. You got to be open. You got to be resilient. You got to ask if you don't understand a subject, a question, whatever it is. You just have to be willing, to advance. And I think this is what I would tell anybody that confronts me with such a question. It's a matter of opening up the opportunities for yourself, and therefore you need to be open. You need to accept challenges. You need to accept your lack of knowledge in some areas. And if you appreciate all of that and just be willing, to advance all the time, then you're fine for the future. So develop that mindset of, rather saying yes than no. So make yes your conditional response and think about whether it should be a no at some point in some particular instances. But don't, like Ahmed said, don't shy away from opportunities that just don't present themselves as such on first glimpse. So I think that would be my recommendation.
Great, thank you. Ahmed, Alaa, Johannes, thank you so much for participating in our alumni career conversation today. It's been fantastic to talk to the three of you from the class of 2015, and wishing you all the very best.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was really nice seeing everybody and talking to you.
Definitely.